Grace and peace to you in the name of God the Creator, Christ the Redeemer, and the Spirit who sustains us. Amen. What does grace look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? What does grace taste like? We're used to thinking of grace as this hard to understand, intangible gift that we receive from God in our baptisms. If we had to define it, we might say something like the gift of forgiveness of sins, or I know that God is with me. When I looked up the word, dictionary.com says the theological definition is the freely given, unmerited favor of God, or the influence or spirit of God on humans to regenerate or strengthen them. Merriam-Webster says, in Christianity, the definition is a God-given help or kindness or a state of acceptance by God. And when I go to BibleHub.com, which has a Greek to English dictionary, it defines charis, the Greek word for grace, as the divine influence upon the heart and its reflection in the life. It all feels a little bit like what someone once said about something else. I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it. In the Gospel of John, the writer uses grace 4 times, all 4 of them at the very end of the prologue between verses 14 and 18 of the first chapter. After that, the writer never uses the word again. Instead, like good writers do, instead of telling us what grace is, the writer shows us. This morning's text, the wedding at Cana, is the first of 7 signs that Jesus performs in the Gospel of John. Although they're all miraculous, John doesn't call them miracles. John chooses to call them signs because the important thing isn't what happens. The important thing is how they point to Jesus. As always, the writer of John is playing with language. The text starts with the phrase 3 days later. This is the last time that the writer will be counting days until Jesus is arrested. The 3 days is significant not because of how much time has elapsed since the last events in John's gospel, but because of how much time will elapse during the passion, the arrest, trial, and crucifixion, and the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus' mother is there. We see her in this story, and then she too won't be seen again until we see her standing at the foot of the cross. But in this story, she has an important role to play. Weddings in the ancient Near East were important social occasions, not religious ones. They lasted for a week or longer, and more than being a celebration of the couple, they were a celebration of 2 families coming together. The women in the groom's family all came together to prepare the food for the wedding feast, and it was common for the friends of the groom to give him gifts of wine before the wedding so that there would be enough to last through the celebration. So to run out of wine wasn't just a sign that he and his family didn't have enough wine. It was a sign that they didn't have enough friends. It was a mark of shame that would follow them around. So Jesus' mother, Jesus, and the disciples are all at this wedding in Galilee, and the wine is running out. Mary could be getting involved in this situation because there's some connection between her family and the groom's family. She could be one of the women who's helping to prepare and serve the feast, or it could simply be that she's aware of what her son is capable of. Whatever the case, she approaches him to tell him that this family is about to face the public shame of running out of wine for their guests at the wedding feast. His response is interesting, especially in light of the beginning of the text referencing his passion and resurrection. He says to her, "My hour has not yet come." It isn't time yet. But time for what? Most theologians agree that he's referencing his passion, resurrection, and ascension. He is in the process of becoming, of growing into who he's meant to be, who he will be. We all know what that feels like. And maybe like most of us at the very beginning of our becoming who we will be, he's a little lacking in confidence. But like good mothers everywhere, she sees who he is and what he's capable of. She sees not only his humanity, but his divinity. And what's more, she acknowledges it. And in a setting like this that is about to turn into a crisis, not for him or for her, but for someone else, she pushes him to acknowledge who he is and what he can do. She sets his ministry in motion by telling the servers to do whatever he tells them to do. After all, it's one thing to say to Nathanael, "I saw you while you were sitting under the fig tree." It's entirely another to perform a sign publicly for the first time. The amazing thing is, the servants do what he asked them to do. Who just follows the instructions of some random guy who tells them to fill up the ceremonial jars with water, then ladle some out to the person in charge, even on the say-so of somebody who knows him and who seems to know what she's doing? They would look like fools or worse if the person in charge had taken a drink and it was still water. It takes a huge amount of trust for them to do what he tells them to do. And they can hear him loud and clear speaking to them as I'm speaking to you now. But it works. The water has become wine in abundance. 6 jars of this size would equal between 600 and 1,000 bottles of wine today. And this is the good stuff. Better than what the groom and his family were serving a few days earlier when the wedding feast started. The thing is, we don't usually hear Jesus talking to us like this in simple declarative sentences, giving us step-by-step instructions on navigating our way through life so that grace is poured out abundantly in our lives. It doesn't work that way. It's worth pointing out, though, that even during Jesus' lifetime, it didn't work that way for most people. Jesus' job was not to travel from wedding to wedding, making sure that no one ran out of wine, or to heal everyone who was sick. None of that was the point. All of the things he did, all of the signs he performed, all of the conversations he had about living water and being born from above were to point to what he wanted, what he needed us to know if we are to believe in him, if we are to abide in him and taste abundant grace. The thing is, this takes time. It takes practice. It takes effort. And along the way, you might find yourself questioning what you're doing. Think about these servers filling these 6 stone jars with water. A 25-gallon drum today measures roughly 2 feet tall. The stone jars would have been a little taller, roughly waist height. Stone is heavy, so they would have had to bring the water to the jars. And water is heavy. A gallon weighs a little over 8 pounds. 25 gallons of water is a little over 200 pounds. And 25 gallons times 6 jars is almost 1,250 pounds. So they would have had to fill the jars slowly, by hand, back and forth from the well. How many times do you think they would ask themselves, what in the world are we doing? This is ridiculous. But they keep at it. And in the end, their trust in Jesus is rewarded with abundance, not for them or not only for them, but for all those at the wedding feast. A tangible grace that they can see and smell and taste. The festival of Epiphany, commemorated each January 6th, is our celebration of Jesus revealed to the world. An epiphany is a sudden, profound realization, sometimes described as an aha moment. But anyone who has ever had an epiphany knows that it doesn't just happen. We don't just suddenly understand something the first time we are presented with it. We have to think about it, ask it questions, look at it from different angles, ask others for their perspectives. Newton didn't just watch an apple fall from the sky one day and say, aha, and invent the theory of gravity. He built upon years of his own studies, as well as the work of scientists who came before him. The same is true with us and abundant grace. Not with receiving abundant grace, for God has already given it to us and it cannot be taken away. But when it comes to understanding the nature of abundant grace, seeing it in our lives, tasting it in the bread and wine at Jesus' table, feeling it in the waters on the font, hearing it in the words that resonate in our minds and hearts and that come out of our mouths, that epiphany takes time and pondering and asking it questions and seeing it at work in others' lives and reflecting that back on our own life. It is never too late to be who Jesus calls us to be, to taste the abundant grace that Jesus pours out for us and for all people, and to testify to that abundance. Amen.